everyone. Thank you so much for joining us at CXC 2025. My name is Anne Drozd. I am the museum coordinator at the Billy Ireland Cartoon Library and Museum. And I'm joined by...
I'm Dr. Felecia Jones Ross, and I'm an associate professor in the School of Communication at Ohio State University.
So how many of you have been to the Billy Ireland? So by intro slides, I might rush through because I think you all probably know most of this, but we are the largest collection of comics and cartoon art, and we make that collection available to anyone who is interested in learning more and using that collection. And so feel free to reach out to us with any questions at all. We really want to make the collection accessible to you and help you find what you need. We are part of the Ohio State University Libraries, and we are dedicated to preserving and exhibiting cartoon art. We do have a dedicated museum gallery space. It is open Tuesday through Sunday from 1 to 5. We have the permanent collection that's on display in our Treasures from the Gallery, and then treasures from the collection, and then we've got 2 rotating galleries that change out every 6 months or so. If you were at the reception last night, you probably heard that we will be closing after our current exhibitions in November, so starting November 10th until May of next year, and we will be reopening with a wholly reimagined space in that permanent collection area. So why does OSU have a collection? And we've got a lovely picture. Thanks, Lucy, for being here. We are here thanks to Milton Caniff, and Lucy Shelton Caswell was the founding curator who worked with Milton Caniff when he donated his collection back in 1977. He was a student at OSU, and he then went on to be a very well-known cartoonist. He was a household name in the 20th century, and he did Steve Canyon, Terry and the Pirates, and some other comic strips that you can see in our collection. And he also is known for designing the Buckeye leaf. So that's a little piece of trivia that I just recently learned. And who was Billy Ireland? He was a cartoonist for the Columbus Dispatch from 1898 to 1935. He was an illustrator, and he was really dedicated to Columbus and Central Ohio. He created the weekly strip, The Passing Show, which we have on display in the lobby, and many of you have probably seen, and he mentored Milton Caniff. And so we are named after Billy Ireland because of that. But I wanted to really point out, because we're talking about newspaper cartoonists in the Black press, I wanted to also point out that we have, a lot of our collections are tied to newspaper comics too. So we do have a really strong collection of newspaper comics. How many of you are familiar with the San Francisco Academy of Comic Art collection? Most of you are. So again, I'm going to just give a brief overview, but Bill Blackbeard was a comics historian, and he was very interested in preserving the history of newspaper comic strips and cartoon art. And back when libraries were converting everything to microfilm, do most of you remember using microfilm? So it was very hard to use. It was thought to be a space-saving device for libraries to compact their collection to make it fit in a smaller space so they could expand the collection, and then they also thought that it would hold up better than newsprint. As many of us know, it did not. And when the libraries were converting everything, they were getting rid of the physical newspapers. So these large bound volumes that you're seeing here with Mr. Blackbeard is what the libraries were discarding. So he created a nonprofit and went around and got all of these newspapers, and this is what it looked like when it was stored in his space. But in 1998, it came to Ohio State University in that many semi-trucks. So it took 6 semi-trucks, and it's the largest collection that has come to the Billy Ireland. And I don't know if we will get a larger collection. Hopefully someday we will have taken over more space, and we will have larger collection come in. But for now, this is the largest collection. It's also one of the most used collections. We have a lot of researchers coming in and using this. But since it came in 1998, it was about 2.5 million comic strip clippings and tear sheets. We have had many different archivists working on it over those 25 plus years, and one of them is sitting with us today. Hi, Anne. We're still processing the collection. I want to say it's about 45% of the way processed, but we're still finding things. When it came to Ohio State, it was packed in boxes. A lot of what you saw, you can kind of see some little slips of paper sticking out in his stacks. Bill Blackbeard had his own method of tracking things, and some of that was lost when things were packed. It didn't all come with it necessarily. So we are still working on archiving and cataloging everything, but in 2022, our archivists came across a box of Chicago Defender newspapers from the 1940s that we did not know were in the Bill Blackbeard collection. Jenny Robb, our head curator for comics and cartoon art, wrote an article in Inks magazine that is available, and I'm happy to share this link with anyone who would like to read it, and really highlighted what we have in that collection. So there's editorial cartoons by Jay Jackson and Henry Brown, and comic strips featuring Black superheroes like Speed Jackson and Bungleton Green. So a lot of really amazing content that we didn't realize we had such beautiful, nice, preserved prints of. So for those of you who may not be familiar with microfilm, a few years ago we did an exhibition on the cartoonist Ollie Harrington. We did not realize that we had some of the beautiful newspaper prints, and some of them have since been acquired too. This one's actually from the Nancy Goldstein collection. But this is an example of what the microfilm looks like. Most of the digitized versions you're going to get access to if you go to a computer database are from these. So libraries have digitized these, and this is what's accessible. This is what it should look like. The artists were using sometimes light washes or Conte crayons. They were very highly skilled artists, and you're losing the subtlety of the lines and a lot of the detail of the comic strips. So without having this resource, we thought a lot of these were lost to history. And thankfully, Bill Blackbeard saved them. There are probably others out there, so we're just trying to, not a lot of work has been done in comic studies and just collecting comics in this way. So we are trying to make sure that people are aware of this difference and that we are trying to work on making these more accessible. So we also wanted to give an overview a little bit of the Black press. So
Okay.
Felecia.
Well, you can read the slide, but that is explaining that it's almost 200 years old, the Black press, as we know it, of course. And because we're always learning new things in history, and we have to change the information as we learn it. And yes, it is, just to summarize what is the role of the Black press, particularly Black newspapers, is to make a population visible, and to make it visible in an accurate, dignified way, because the information that was out about the Black population, and go back to 1827, the southern part of the United States, Blacks were still were enslaved. So that was before emancipation. But they, in New York City and other places in the North, there was a community. There were communities of free Blacks, and even with that freedom, white newspapers were giving them undignified treatment, accused them of crimes that did not commit, imitated, not mocked the way they supposedly talk, which they really didn't talk like that, but it just enforced white supremacy, black inferiority. And so in 1827, two people, John Westrom and Samuel Cornish, decided to found this paper to not only correct the incorrect record of the white press in New York City, okay, but also to highlight the achievements and protest the mistreatment and protest slavery, among other things.
Yeah, so this is just an assortment of some of the titles and the headlines of a lot of the black press papers.
I want to add that if you notice the title, Freedom's Journal, you know, this was during slavery. The North Star, that was Frederick Douglass's paper. How many of you have heard of Frederick Douglass? Okay, not everybody has, but Frederick Douglass, and so that was a recognition. North Star, that was the North Star that guided slave people to escape from slavery, and some of the other titles, like the Chicago Defender motto. It doesn't have it up here, but it's a race newspaper. It calls itself a race newspaper, and had probably on the editorial page something to the fact that fighting for racial equality. I don't remember the exact words of it. So Pittsburgh Courier, we're going to chronicle the activities of African Americans. So the titles really say a lot about, Michigan Chronicle says the same thing, really are revealing about what those papers were about.
And then this is a map showing by county in 1950. This is, it might be hard to read, but the purple and the pink are the more populated with black population in the United States. So, and what's interesting is when I was looking at different maps, I was trying to decide what might show you, like, where regionally the distribution and what cities had the largest black population. A lot of them are from the cities that were publishing these papers, but I was also looking at recent census data, and it's still very close to this too. So a lot of the same population distribution in the United States.
And I might want to add, you might want to question the methodology used, because a lot of populations are not counted.
Yes.
And so, and so you have to, I tell my students, think of everything with a critical eye.
This is just a list showing the peak circulation. So these were the most widely circulated black press newspapers, and some are still actively publishing. A lot of them, as you were telling me in our earlier conversation, that they've moved to online. And are the black press papers seeing a lot of the same decline in readership and publishing as the mainstream and everything?
As everything else. But don't count them out. I mean, there's so many things we miss because maybe it's because of the source of where it's published. But it turns out to be very valuable information. And we want to add to this list, we have the Cleveland Gazette, which was a great newspaper. That's a nice run, very vocal, very much of an advocate of equality. But then also we want to also include the Cleveland Call Post and the Columbus Call Post. The Cleveland Call Post, very, very impactful newspaper. It is credited with advocating for the election of the first black mayor of a major city, Carl Stokes. The Cleveland Call Post played a big role in that. And of course, the Columbus Call and Post, very powerful, well-respected local newspaper of Central Ohio. And many of us who are from Columbus, and maybe grew up in Columbus at a particular time period, probably quite familiar with the Columbus Call and Post. And a few others I can add, but we don't have all day, so.
And so this is just transitioning into, the reason why we're here is we're talking about a digital exhibition that we created at the Billy Ireland, thanks to these newspapers being found in the Bill Blackbeard San Francisco collection. I was talking a little bit with Lucy before we started, and she mentioned that this came from something much earlier than, so I've been at the Billy Ireland for about going on 7 years. So I have not been there long enough to know that this has been something that you and Lucy have been talking about for a long time, about showing these cartoons in an exhibition or in a context in which they can actually be studied and like having good examples of them.
Yes.
So the lack of having the resources was preventing the story being told. And so thanks to Bill Blackbeard preserving these comics, and the Chicago Defender, and of course the Pittsburgh Courier, doing all of the work that they did, is why we're able to tell the story that we're here to really share with you today. And so we want to give context to what the Double V Victory campaign was. So do you want to talk a little bit about that, Felecia?
Well, the term Double V, as we know it, and Double V stands for, was a term used during World War II to mean victory overseas as well as victory at home. And the victory was for democracy. And victory at home, you would think at home you already had democracy. Well, democracy in name only with the victory at home. It still had not been achieved for all of American citizens. And so this is a good time to remind, since the United States was in a war against fascism, Nazism, anti-democratic ideals and practices, black newspapers, the Double V, meant that you know, if you're going to tell other people not to be fascist, not to be anti-democratic, you might want to look at home and also not be anti-democratic, and also not be anti-democratic, and also be fascist. And you're doing that with a large segment of your citizens. And so that's what Double V was, in a reminder. And it got that name basically from this letter to the editor from James Thompson, who was wondering, you know, and this came out, the letter came out in 1942, a couple of months after Pearl Harbor. And basically he was saying, and befuddled by all this double talk about democracy and the defense of our way of life, and asking other young Negroes, basically, what was the question? I want to know, and I believe every colored American who is thinking wants to know that, well, colored Americans suffer still the indignities that have been heaped upon them in the past. And so he used the word double in his letter, and thus, you know, the Pittsburgh Courier published this letter, and thus started this Double V campaign. Want to point out one other thing. This guy was from Wichita, Kansas, shows up in the Pittsburgh Courier. So it shows the reach of black newspapers in places where we might not know about. Now, if you looked at that map, I don't think you saw so many red dots of black people there, but there's one right there. Yeah, so, also, double V really meant more than double V during wartime. You know, black newspapers always questioned the notion of democracy in name only in the United States, and pointed out democracy really wasn't applied to all the citizens. So this is another chance during wartime, now that we have everybody's attention about democracy, to point that out again.
Of course, the slide didn't show everything here, but we wanted to show you, what I had here was just showing you a photo of the man who was the designer of this logo, who was Wilbert L. Holloway, who worked for the Pittsburgh Courier. So he designed the logo that was first published in the Pittsburgh Courier and then kind of really became a symbol of the Double B campaign. And it wasn't just in the newspapers, it became like a call to action, and a lot of people really rallied around the Double V campaign.
And Double V was a catchy title, you know, and just as she said there, you know, it was, you would have Double V dances, Double V sporting events. So, you know, it was a rallying cry in all segments of activities, not just about military action and politics, just in every aspect of life.
So there were handkerchiefs and buttons and a lot of other ephemera that came from it. I also found this and thought that this was interesting to include, that the Office of War and Information sponsored this 1943 poster showing United We Win and just integrated aircraft plants. So this image of, oh, we're all in this together was being presented while the story of what was really happening here in the United States was not really being promoted in the mainstream press.
Right, that's what they were promoting. Everybody's happy. Everybody's benefiting from this democracy. Okay.
Here.
Okay.
Are you taking questions right now?
Yes.
I have a question.
Now are we taking questions now?
Oh, actually, if you've got a question.
It was related to that last photograph. So United We Win, and you say it was promoted in the military, but the military was segregated, so I don't quite get it.
It's a lie. I mean, yeah, the military was segregated.
So that was propaganda, basically.
Yeah. The Office of War Information, that's what it did. It was propaganda, getting everybody excited about it. And if I may go back, you know, this was World War II. They had the same thing. They call it the Committee on Public Information in World War I. Same thing. I beg your
Even worse.
Yeah, even worse. After you mean the way blacks were treated after World War I? Is that what you mean?
I mean the control of the information that people.
Oh yeah, it was even worse.
A script in World War I.
Yeah, and I want to be able to. Well, let's go through this, I guess, and about the control that happened during World War II as well.
So rather than show you more slides, I wanted to just walk you through the digital exhibition that you can access on the Billie Ireland website. And again, I'm happy to share the link with you, and just reach out to me after the show, and I can give you more information. But this is, and I really wish I could make this larger, and I don't know how to do it on this machine, so sorry about that. But wanted to talk a little bit about the Chicago Defender and these two gentlemen. So did you want to talk a little bit about Robert Abbott and?
Robert Abbott from, I guess, near Savannah, Georgia. That's where he was from. He went to Hampton University and moved to Chicago to be a lawyer. Didn't get much activity as a lawyer, but he also had acquired the ability to work in printing while he was a student at Hampton, and used his printing skills and publishing skills to start his newspaper in Chicago. Started it in 1905, Chicago Defender. Very much of a great promoter, great business person, and but also very much an advocate for Negroes, that was colored Americans at the time, and since he was from the South, he personally knew about the oppression and the mistreatment and experienced it. And so he started this, what they call a Northern Drive, which really persuaded blacks to leave the South to work in the northern factories that needed workers because of World War I, and because they needed to produce, especially in the defense areas, and they needed, they were short of labor, and a lot of the European immigrants who had been working in those factories left to fight for their countries, their home countries during World War I, so that left a void. And so, as the timing has it, there were opportunities in Chicago and in other northern areas during that time period. And so, with the combination of the opportunities in the North, which they illustrated in the Defender, and the bad treatment in the South that they pointed out in the Defender, and the black people in the South said, yeah, you're right, let me leave while I have the opportunity to do so. It really increased the population of Chicago and other northern cities as well, and thus increased the circulation of those newspapers. And so a lot of the newspapers, I would say Pittsburgh newspaper, New York newspaper, the Afro chain, they benefited from the movement of blacks into those urban areas. And by the time of the Double V campaign, however, Robert Abbott had died, and his nephew, John Singstack, had taken over as publisher, and we can maybe fill in some more of the areas about the Chicago Defender's role in the Double V campaign as we go along.
And so some of the exhibit that you'll see online does include the images that we're going to show you some details of within the context of the page. So one of the things I really want to point out about the importance of having the full tear sheets is you're getting the cartoons not removed from the context of the page, but it's speaking to everything else that was being communicated from the paper. So I think it's really important to have that context of that primary source. So the cartoon, the image is going to be visceral, and often people say that cartoons simplify, but I really want to say that they clarify. They bring right to the surface what is most important. And so that's what the cartoonists that were given their voice in these newspapers and not in the mainstream press are really able to do. And so that brings us to the cartoonists that we're highlighting here. There's 14 cartoons that are included in this exhibition. Most of them are by Jay Jackson. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you learned about Jay Jackson?
Jay Jackson, Jay Jackson was an Ohioan. It's from Oberlin, Ohio. And just like a lot of the other cartoonists I know for the black press, maybe for mainstream press, but that's just one of the many things they did. They did the art for those newspapers. They drew the comics. They drew the art for the advertisements. they do the art for the posters. Maybe not just for that newspaper necessarily, but in other areas where you need art, you need visuals. And so he did some of everything. He had worked at the Chicago Defenders in the 1920s, part-time working for Abbott's Monthly, which had been a temporary, well, a short-lived weekly magazine about that, called Abbott's Monthly, that had magazine types of articles, I think literary pieces in them. So he did the illustration for that. And then as time went on, he replaced one of the other cartoonists, persons who did the editorial cartoons on the Defender. And that hit at about a time of, I'll say maybe the mid-1930s, but around World War II, during the Double V campaign, until maybe the end of the 1940s. That's what he did. He did the cartooning, you could say the primary cartoonist for the Chicago Defender. And he eventually took a job in California, in Hollywood. I think he drew the images, I think, for an animated program.
Yeah, so
Was it
the Search for Christ?
In Search for Christ? What was the name of it? The Search for Christ. And it's the artwork for the television show, and I believe it was an animated show. And so, he had to do the drawings for the animation. And unfortunately, he died at, well, some people may not call it a young age, but I think it might have been about 50 years old when he died. He died of a heart attack, and that's his life, generally. And I might add that reason why I'm a little bit sketchy, I wish we knew more about him, had more details about him. What I had to do was just keyword his name everywhere and piece together information about his life. The obituary that we saw announcing his death in the Defender gave me a lot of information, but then you would see little tidbits of information about work that he's done here and there. And so you try to look up, get more information about the last thing that he did with the Search for Christ. Not very much information about that, but you have to really dig with every segment of a person's life to find information about them. And you're going to talk about Cornelius Johnson. That's the same thing with him. He only had the one cartoon, but later found his obituary and later found out that he did artwork for the first, illustrating the first black astronaut. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit hazy on the details there, but one of the things, this was an obituary published in, I think it was 1984. So the Chicago Tribune published that obituary, mainstream paper. Well, this is 1984. Well, it was okay to give information about black people then, but he was the first black teacher at, I don't remember the name of the high school in Chicago, but
Englewood High School.
Englewood High School. So he's the first black teacher, but he'd also drawn cartoons for the Defender and other entities. And so it really gives you an idea that their work is varied, different places. You have to really piece together.
So
what
these
they
cartoonists were not a household name like Milton Caniff. They were not getting the same widespread fame that other cartoonists
At
were
that time.
At that time.
Because the black people were invisible. Unless they caused the problem, then they become visible.
So I wanted to look at some of the cartoons. How are we doing on time? Still got
Yeah,
a little
got about
bit of time.
20 minutes.
20 minutes, all right.
So
I want to
I
leave
can-
room for questions too, so we will leave about 15 minutes for questions.
And I won't talk so much, I'll just.
Oh, you're giving us a lot of really good information, so thank you. So most of the cartoons that we have from the Chicago Defender in our collection are by Jay Jackson, who also did Bungleton Green, which you saw the example of too. But we really wanted to look at these cartoons that are really bringing to light what the true feelings and like the popular opinion in the Black communities of what was happening during World War II. So I know that you had a few favorites, so let's go ahead and I'm going to skip ahead to one that in particular you wanted to talk about. And of course was it this one?
It was, I can talk about that one.
Okay.
And
bring this one
this was, I want to look at the year that must have been in 1943.
This one was, yes, this was December 25th, 1943.
Okay, and this is one of the, out of the exhibition, this was one of two cartoons that pointed out a kinship that Blacks had with other people of color, including the Japanese, who were considered the enemy at the time. And it's illustrated in this particular cartoon of this South Carolina senator. His name is Senator Cotton Ed Smith. I don't know if it's Cotton was his first name, but you get the message. Cotton Ed Smith, whether it was his real name or not, I think spoke volumes about that. And he was dreaming of a white Christmas, and just noting what he said, showing people of Japanese descent more peonage, more discrimination, more poll tax. All those things applied to the same treatment that African Americans were getting on a regular basis. They threw in people who looked to be Japanese, and that I thought it was quite interesting to see that relationship displayed there.
There was another one.
This one back there.
Okay, this one.
And this is the other one that pointed out that same relationship. And now this one was based on an actual editorial that had been published in the previous issue. And because there was a ship titled the Mississippi that that I don't remember the exact words of the editorial, but it made reference to that ship. And it made reference to, they said, well, if you're going to have a ship by Mississippi, it's related to the end of the war, because this was published a week after the Japanese surrendered. This was September 8th.
September 8th,
1945, and surrender was September 2nd. So it was shortly after that. And
And here's your
and yes, the editorial described that the battleship Mississippi brought with it the civilization of the Old South. And they said, well, you may as well, the vessel should have also included a lynched Negro hanging from the mast, because, again, it was mocking the faux democracy that it was supposed to be protecting, and basically saying, these are people of, not saying it directly, but these are people of color, and you're going to be treating them worse than the black soldiers who trying to defend this democracy. And they had the symbols of the South in the cartoon. Dixie, band playing Dixie. And then they have over there for colored, well, the Jim Crow laws, labels, places where colored people could go and where they couldn't go. And then they have a Japanese civilian, okay, yeah, and it says, I know just how you're going to feel, bub. And so basically pointing out that democracy again. So another example, a double V. And there's another, and that's a very clear example there. You're leaving an enslaved black woman in the USA to rescue an enslaved white woman in Europe, and it says we'll be back. Yeah, right. Yeah, they'll be back, but what does that mean for this woman over here? You can interpret it that way.
So I know we're getting a little bit short on time, so I wanted to see if anyone in the audience had any questions for us. We have about 15 minutes left. Okay. You had a question?
Oh, yes. I was just kind of curious about the fact that this was, you mentioned that this is being used as propaganda, kind of being spread, especially toward the colored side of the segregated military and whatnot. I was curious specifically about syndication of Jay Jackson's work and other cartoonists in the black press, and if there was a wider relationship that the national black community might have had with Jay Jackson, or if it was really localized to Chicago. Was this printing in the South, or was it just printing in the North, or what was that kind of landscape looking like? I'm wondering at the time.
I'm not aware of any particular syndication during that time, but the Chicago Defender, each black newspaper had their own cartoonists. Pittsburgh Courier did, I think the Journal and Guide did, I don't know, can't recall anyone who was, definitely the Chicago Defender. But these papers had a reach. So people everywhere in different regions of the outside of Chicago definitely got the Chicago Defender. They definitely got the Pittsburgh Courier, the Journal and Guide. I'll just share one little thing one thing that's clear, that it was a pass around. It was a weekly paper, so maybe one family, one household might get the Defender, but pass it around to other white households. And so people without syndication, they definitely had access to these cartoons.
I guess a follow-up would be, you know how news organizations, larger news organizations often reach out to local news to get stories. Was there a relationship between the newspapers at the time where if a story came out, it would spread between the newspapers or anything like that?
You mean smaller newspapers in smaller areas? Is that kind of?
I'm curious about how these newspapers and journalists might have been communicating.
Yeah, well, they did communicate, and I'm glad you brought that out. John Singstack was the president of the Negro Newspapers Publishers Association, where the publishers did get the publishers of black newspapers did get together to talk about pooling their resources, pooling their advocacy, so that they could serve their communities better as journalists. And also, black newspapers and all the newspapers did have a tendency to go on and use maybe a cartoon. Let's say the Chicago Defender did not reach Columbus, Ohio, which I'm sure it did, but the local Columbus black newspaper might have, and I don't know if they really did, just use a cartoon by Jay Jackson and say from the Chicago Defender, and this is the cartoon. So they did do that, maybe not as structured as we might think of it, but that did happen.
Anyone else have a question for us?
So what was the relationship between black press newspapers and mainstream newspapers? I know there's a history of competition between different newspapers, like mainstream newspapers. How did more mainstream newspapers respond to there being a lot of there being a black press newspaper?
That's a good, I don't know of any specific response, but just from looking at what was covered in black newspapers and what was not covered in the mainstream newspapers, you could say that they ignored. It didn't count anyway, not unless it posed interest or a threat to mainstream society. So they may, if it's an, and that's a good question to research. I don't know, who did it first. It's almost like they have to sanction what's valuable, what's to be valued. And if they don't sanction what needs to be valued, then they didn't pay it any attention.
That's interesting, because I feel like, I'm curious if because I was curious if they made efforts to censor them, or they basically, because they controlled the information, they controlled what the majority of the population looked at, they could kind of brush aside things that most of what, I don't know, the mainstream population looked at.
I'm not aware of any efforts that mainstream newspapers had to censor them. I don't think they considered it enough of a threat. But on the point of censorship, the government tried to censor black newspapers. I have to say that. We're talking about government control of the press now. It's not anything new. Always done it, especially during wartime. The government definitely, one of the reasons, I didn't say with Double V campaign, technically it lasted for about a year. And one of the reasons why it kind of died down was because the government was enforcing its will on black newspapers. They were they were treating black newspapers as being subversive. They would go to the black newspaper offices and what we call troll them, try to catch them doing something wrong. And so that prompted, I'll say about in September of 1942, John Singstack decided to do a closed ranks type of publication, saying, well, we're all in this together. You don't have to worry about black people going to the enemy type of thing. That's what it was. It was a reassuring type of thing, so that they wouldn't get into trouble with the FBI and with the government. That also happened in World War I, too. So yeah, there was an effort to censor. And so they backed down from the Double V campaign because of it. So are those times familiar now? Yeah, it's nothing new.
Does anyone else have any questions?
You mentioned that this is ongoing in terms of there are certain things you weren't able to find out yet because there's so much more that needs to be researched.
Yes.
In this.
Yes.
Is this an ongoing, updated site, or is it
So,
there are going to be different versions over time?
So right now, this is almost like if we were to install an exhibit in one of our galleries. This is right now considered like this is the exhibit, but you bring up a very valid point. This is a digital exhibit. It's not restrained by a space, a physical space. So yes, this can be an ongoing, we can add more to this. So as more research is done and we find more things, I would love to expand this. But as right now, it just has the 14 cartoons that were found in our collection that were on the double V topic.
It's all we have.
Yeah, sadly.
Yeah.
Anyone else have a question? Yeah.
I'd just say, to follow up on that, there's so much work to do on the Defender. So go look at it and think about how to use that resource and feed into the Billy Ireland, because it's, it's full of other images, adverts that Jane Jackson did that are so interesting as well. So yeah, there's so much work to do.
Somebody needs to do work on Jay Jackson.
Yes. From interview any descendants or relatives that he may have, if they know anything. This is 2025, and
I just say that I had a chance to check out the Defender, and one of the amazing things about looking at that work, especially because it's available at the Billy Ireland Library Museum, is that you have the physical stories to really contextualize the cartoons.
Yeah.
You get an overall kind of experience that takes a bit more time to sit down and read.
Yeah.
But I do think that it's a worthwhile experience just to get that overall, that whole page, that whole day, that whole week.
Mhm.
Is a really powerful experience.
Yeah. There's a question over there.
I just want to mention that I think last year, for folks who are interested in learning more about Jay Jackson, New York Review of Comics published a collection
Okay.
of Bungleton Green and the
Mhm.
Mystic Commandos. So I know it has a short biography about him in it. if
Yeah.
folks want to learn more.
I'll need to get that citation down, so maybe we might add it
Yeah, we can add that
to
to
the
the exhibit too.
properly cited and everything.
Yeah. So, Felecia, as we're wrapping up and coming to the end of our time, I just wanted to see if there was anything else that you didn't get to touch on that you found while you were looking for information to research this exhibit, or just anything else in general about your experience working with this collection. And
Well, it's important that we keep our records of history in real time as much as we can, especially even if it's family history, because you can find out a lot of information about the times that people lived in that will not be in the history books, might not be recorded in newspapers per se. I would suggest, is one of the things that I did was interview an older family member and ask them questions, detailed questions about things that, what games did you play when you were a kid? Who are your teachers? What classes did you take when you were in school? What's the name of your elementary school, your high school? What types of food did you enjoy eating? Your favorite foods when you were a kid and now? All these type of details. I interviewed my parents, who my father would be, if he had lived, he'd be 100 this year, and my mother-in-law. Really rich details that you would never get as what life would happen. And that's something you want to record, preserve it, and perhaps share it collectively with, and then put it in context of what was going on in the world. I remember my father had pointed out that the day that World War II ended, there was just so much noise. They're afraid that people were going to hurt themselves, you know, with firecrackers and whatnot. And like, oh my goodness, you know, this is great, but this is just too much. Well, you know, everybody's happy, but sometimes you can just get carried away. And that's a realistic reaction. History says everybody was happy, but not any problems with over-celebrating.
All right, well, I know that we need to wrap things up because we've got another panel coming into this space, so I want to thank you all so much for coming. I do have information on this slide that I'm happy to share out to anyone, so feel free to reach out to the Billie Ireland. Go to our website, which is cartoons.osu.edu. You can look at our digital exhibits in more detail, and then we've got the resources that we talked about there too. And again, reach out to us with any additional questions. Our resources are available to anyone, and we love to make them available and help you find more information.
And if you find a scrapbook of black cartoons.
Yes, yes, we would love to see that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.